just in a few minutes. Thank you guys. Let's settle down a little bit. But when he comes in, let's get some excitement in this room. It's dreary outside. All right, guys, I'll be right back. Good afternoon, Pontiac. Welcome to Thriving Cities 2.0. My name is Levi Todd, and I am the student assistant for the Executive Office of Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist II. In 20, in 2019, we came right here to Pontiac to have a conversation about the issues that matter to you. And in 2020, we faced a pandemic like no other. But guess what? We still did the work and we made a lot of progress. Now we are here to highlight the progress we've made, but also have a conversation about these 5 issues: kids in cities, affordable and available housing, generational economic opportunity, environmental justice, mobility, transit, and transportation. And please clap your hands as I introduce Mayor Waterman, who will introduce our keynote speaker.
Still getting used to wearing these again. But it is my pleasure indeed to welcome you. And Pontiac has shown out once again for all of you come out, even with our parking lot that's under repair. But as I told the Lieutenant Governor as he came in, generally I welcome him with sunny skies and clear vistas in Pontiac. And today it's kind of rainy, but 75% is not bad, right? For welcoming. But even despite the rain, the welcome in Pontiac is nonetheless as vigorous and sunny as it always is, because we are thrilled to have you come on your Thriving Cities tour, Lieutenant Governor. And as I tell you something about him, and I know we've all seen him in the way he has been so declaratory about the plight of the issues of facing working families, hardworking families. There's a lot of those right here in Pontiac, right? And his background as a software engineer was such things that we all come to recognize as computers and technology is a part of all of our lives now, right? Even Pontiac, we're doing the technology, we're going to the cloud, as you've heard, in all of our technology here in the city. But he's come to talk about some of those things on the Thriving City Tour. And if you have not been reading all of the publicity and media attention about that, it centers on such things as affordable and available housing, generational economic development, environmental quality and justice, kids in cities, and mobility, transit, and transportation. Now, interestingly enough, we've been having a lot of conversation about that right here in the city of Pontiac, right? Many of you have already been to the American Rescue Plan town halls, and you recognize that by the Biden bucks, the $37.7 million that we have in the city of Pontiac to bring real good to our city, right? And it is along those same strategic priorities that we have addressed that. And as we have said, we wanted every citizen in Pontiac to have the chance to be engaged and give their input. And so many already have. We've had a number of town halls for districts 1 and 2, and then again for 3, 4, and 6. We're having one for District 5 and 7 in the next coming days. And then we're going to have one hosted by Oakland University in November the 6th. And that is which we're going to have a nonprofit orientation. But we're centering those talks about our strategic priorities in the city of Pontiac. And that includes restoring our neighborhoods and providing citizen relief. This is post-COVID one-time money. We want to make sure that we get citizen relief, and citizens need that right now, right now. And that's what we're letting people know that we want to use that money for. We're doing it for business development and job creation. A third bucket is infrastructure improvements. All of us know that we need our roads, our streets, our highways repaired. We're doing it for public safety, okay? We want safe neighborhoods, right? And I see Pastor Jones is sitting right here, and he's one of the founders and chairman now of the Sheriff's Safety Unit, all right? We want to continue that right here in the city of Pontiac. And then we want smart city initiatives, as we talked about technology. So as you come and talk to us about how you and our esteemed Governor Whitmer are doing that same talk throughout and are working with our legislature to let them know the importance of the need of hardworking families throughout, particularly in these strategic areas. And as we look to similar cities as ours, and I know all the work you've been doing with our friends in Benton Harbor, Mayor Muhammad, which I always give my support to in terms of the issues they had with water and the importance of that. And I'm here, I'm glad that you are coming to our city once again to talk to us, to confer with us, and to tell us how we are working collectively to make those changes for our communities that will help our communities thrive and help us to be livable, workable, survivable cities. And at this point, bringing to you with great esteem and great honor, I would like to welcome once again our Lieutenant Governor, Garland Gilchrist.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is such a privilege to be back here in Pontiac. Guys, I gotta get an apartment over here. Good to be back in this room too, and to be here with so many of you who are, doing the work to help people, doing the work to position people for success, doing the work to ensure that everybody in Pontiac sees a future for themselves in Pontiac or wherever they choose to go. Ultimately, the work of public servants needs to be to create the conditions for that to be true for everyone, from all walk of life, every station, no matter what your background, persuasion, experience is, that you see a path for yourself and your family and our collective future, because we do all have a role to play in it. And this conversation about thriving cities and thriving communities is really about that. How do we lay that groundwork for that to be true? And so I want to thank you, Madam Mayor, for welcoming me back here. Last time I was over here in this room, I got beaten pool back in the back room. That was tough. But nevertheless, we here also just want to thank all of you for coming out and taking time and weathering the, I won't call this a storm, it's a little bit of rain. But I read a quote a couple of months ago that said that for those who only think joy comes in the sunshine have never danced in the rain. And I've been thinking about that a lot since I heard it, because it tells you that no matter what circumstances we are presented with, we got something to present to those circumstances. And we have something to do. We have things that we can do, that we are capable of. And I have every confidence in every person in Pontiac, and every confidence in every person in Michigan that we can move forward. So thank all of you for coming and being part of this conversation. This is going to be a bit interactive at the end after I finish telling you a few things up top. But again, I just want to thank everyone for being here. Brian, I just want to call you out, my friend. Thank you. Thank you so much. So every time I see her, she's trying to get me to Pontiac. Every time I see her, no matter where we at. Trying to get to Pontiac. So thriving cities. Now, this is the second time I've been here to Pontiac to have this conversation. In 2019, I launched a tour called Thriving Cities, which is all about improving quality of life for people who live in cities. Simple premise, it's because a lot of people live in cities in Michigan. And so if we can raise the floor of quality of life in cities, we can do that for everybody across the state. And so we thought about, what are the areas for this conversation that we should focus on? And we chose 5. You've heard them a couple times. I want to say it again because it's important. Creating access to affordable housing. It's an elemental, foundational thing we must do. Creating generational economic opportunity so everyone sees that they have a role to play in today's and tomorrow's economy at every age, at every level of engagement. Creating environmental quality and justice, recognizing that both of those things can be achieved at the same time. Improving quality of life for kids in cities. Let's phrase that way on purpose. Kids is bigger than education. Quality of life for kids in cities and a child's entire experience in a city, we have a chance to invest in and improve. And then creating access to transportation and mobility services that are truly available, accessible, affordable, and useful to people, to move people, goods, ideas, and services across the community, and to connect this community better to its neighbors, to other communities, because of all the opportunity that that can unlock. So those are the 5 buckets of conversation that we talked about in 19 that we're going to revisit here in 2020. And to be clear, just so we're not making mistakes, this is not meant to be a comprehensive list. Okay, that's intentional. You know, there are things that aren't called out explicitly, some of which I will speak to, but I'll give you just a concrete example. You don't see public safety on that list. But I think everybody knows that public safety matters to your quality of life in the city. Now, I will talk about some specific proposals that we have on improving public safety, but also just want to be real about something. Like, I think people experience safety when they feel invested in, when they feel like there's a role for them to play in a community, when they feel like the community is looking out for them and has their best interests at heart. And I think if we can improve quality of life in these 5 areas, that is a feeling that more people will experience. And I think that will also help us deliver safer communities. So it's all connected. So we'll talk about that explicitly, but I just want to share again, these are meant to cover everything, but not to necessarily explicitly call it out. So let's go right in then to affordable housing. Affordable housing is an issue in pretty much every community in the state of Michigan. Now, we went to 19 cities to talk about this in 2019. That was poetic. We're going to 24 cities this year because there are more contexts in which we need to have this conversation. But regardless of that context, like, the issue is still present. And we need more people to have access to more housing. And of all the things that this pandemic highlights as being critically important to survival, having a safe, affordable place to live, we can call that first amongst equals. We saw the risk that is associated with a person being destabilized by losing access to housing during this pandemic, and how dangerous that is and was to their health, to their well-being, to their livelihood. But that's always true. Like, your home is this jumping off point for your participation in society. When that is not stable, when it's not secured, a lot of stuff falls off. And so how elemental this is has led Governor Gretchen Whitmer and I to prioritize investing in creating more access to more affordable housing. So that's why earlier this year, we proposed a $100 million investment into the state's Community Development Fund. For those housing folks in there, that is the state's Housing Trust Fund, which basically means it's an account that was created with the sole purpose of building affordable housing. That was created in the 60s. We've never really invested in it the way that it was designed. We've proposed putting $100 million into this fund, not because we think affordable housing is merely a $100 million problem, because we instead are saying the state of Michigan is going to put a stake in the ground and declare that we are committed to investing in affordable housing. And we believe that that will attract additional investment in affordable housing. This first $100 million, we think, will pull down about $380 million in additional private investments in affordable housing. And what's that going to look like? In addition to actually building new housing, rehabbing existing housing, which is better for the environment, rehabbing this housing, having there be a healthy mix, single family. Everybody don't want to live in a single family house. Some people do. Multifamily, apartments, density, or lack thereof, whatever it is. Having choice about how to manage that. But also, this money is looking to actually remove the barriers to people becoming homeowners for the first time or homeowners once again. And what are those barriers? Down payments, security deposits, but also, first and last month rent. You know what I'm saying? Things you need to have in order to actually get into a place. But then going a step further, It's nice to have a house, it's better to keep one. So that's why this also will help people with eviction prevention, foreclosure prevention, to keep people in the homes that they have. We think this can be a transformative investment for thousands of families. And again, the private investment that will bring down, we think will also help to multiply that impact. And we hope that this sets a new floor for investing in housing in the state of Michigan, because this is a problem that persists everywhere and that we must solve. So we started with that one because that's the jumping off point. Moving to the next piece about creating generational economic opportunity, really what this is all about is the fact that it's difficult to see a future for yourself in a community if you don't see an economic future for yourself in a community. It's difficult for that to be a future that you want to participate in, that you want to invest in, if we don't see that. Now, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of those economic futures impacted very, very, very negatively, especially for those who work in the smallest businesses in our community or who manage and own the smallest businesses in our communities. And I'm saying this as a two-time recovering entrepreneur myself. We have work to do to support pathways to economic opportunity in Michigan. And so we've had this conversation around the state for a couple of years. And I want to bring to you now a couple of proposals that the governor has put forward that we think are laying a foundation for that now that can send us into the future. And it starts with what's happened to people and businesses during this pandemic. We got hit hard. 1.5 of Black-owned businesses, either significantly or permanently, had to close their doors and close their operations. That was a disparate impact. But the question is, why weren't these kind of businesses able to get the support from all these federal programs you heard about on the news? Paycheck Protection Program, EIDL loans, all this stuff. The federal government was really trying. In the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know what was happening with the virus. It was a novel virus. It was dangerous. We just knew stuff wasn't safe. But we knew we had to support people who were working and people who own these businesses. So the federal government got to quick work and created these programs to support them. But the challenge is, obviously, as you know in life, when you're working fast, sometimes you miss stuff, right? Like sometimes things get left out. Not intentionally. I think the feds were well-intentioned with these programs, but sometimes you don't quite catch everybody. So I'm gonna give 2 examples that deeply impact particularly communities like Pontiac. So the first is the smallest businesses in our community, called a micro enterprise. Businesses that have fewer than 9 employees. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that your favorite business in your neighborhood probably has fewer than 9 employees. The spot you go to get coffee, if it's not like a Starbucks. The place you get your hair cut or hair done. The store on the corner. Those are micro enterprises. Businesses that have less than 9 employees couldn't get the PPP loan. They were ineligible for the program. You know that 94% of businesses owned by Black folks in Michigan have fewer than 9 employees? Like I said, that wasn't intentionally designed not to give Black people money. But what happened was they ended up being left out of that opportunity. So in the state of Michigan, we've prioritized, we have specific funds dedicated to addressing the needs of micro enterprises, of these smallest businesses. That'll be added to the 23 programs that were started by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation during the pandemic that supported 25,000 businesses, that protected 205,000 jobs. But we need to go do more and go further. So these monies, as part of our economic jumpstart plan, are seeking to do just that. Now, the second kind of business that needs unique attention and important attention are new businesses, businesses that just started. Because heaven forbid you started a restaurant in February of 2020, or you started a personal services business in December of 2019. But you also were not eligible for a PPP loan if you started a new business in that time frame. Why? Because in order to qualify for the loans, you had to tell the bank what your previous payroll was, so they would know how much to loan you. But if you are a new business, you don't have previous payroll by definition. So you were not eligible to get those resources. But see, my vision for the economy, I actually want people to be confident enough to try to start a business in Pontiac, Michigan. And so you need to know that the state of Michigan is going to be there for you when you make that investment and bet on yourself and your community. So that's why we've also set aside programs specifically to support startup businesses. And when I say startup, I don't mean like startup technology businesses necessarily, although look, I'm a tech guy, I want that to happen, but I mean launching ideas into the world from your community. We are going to support that. We think this is how we lay a foundation for Michigan's new economy in terms of actually creating pathways to well-paying middle-class jobs, to entrepreneurs who see their dreams growing without measure, to us growing this middle class from the middle out. Because that's how we will build this new economy going forward. That is our economic plan, to invest in people in that way. That is why we have fully funded in the state budget that was signed a few weeks ago. We have fully funded programs that provide people tuition-free pathways to professional training and services and associate's degrees. The Michigan Reconnect program. You hear about that stuff, like what's going to happen to at the federal level. The Michigan Reconnect program is a state level program that provides tuition-free pathway to community college for anybody over 25. That's the only requirement, period. This is because we want people to invest in themselves and their futures. Regardless of what direction you want to take your career, the state of Michigan wants to invest in you. And we want to step further with people who have been working every day to protect and sustain life during the pandemic. We made a program called Futures for Frontliners. The state of Michigan was the only state in the country to use federal COVID response dollars to invest in people's education by providing a tuition-free pathway to community college or professional training or certification in a high-demand skill. Hundreds of thousands of Michiganders have already signed up for both of these programs. And we fully funded them on a bipartisan basis, by the way, to make them available everywhere to people in Michigan. And when I'm talking about future frontliners, I'm talking about not only frontline medical professionals, nurses, nurse practitioners, et cetera. I'm talking about people who are stocking grocery shelves, people who work at the utility company trying to keep the lights on and the internet running, people who are working to protect and sustain life for all of us, bus drivers, sanitation workers, people who are cleaning up at your kids' school, even when students weren't there. Investing in their future. That is our vision for this economy. And that's how I believe we'll be able to create pathways to generational economic opportunity and progress for everybody in every city in Michigan. So we're moving forward to talk about environmental equality and justice. So I want to make sure we're all grounded on what I'm talking about. So when I say environmental justice, what I mean is the places that unfortunately and historically have been visited by the most environmental calamity are the same places that have been fighting against persistent, historic, generational poverty and racism. That these things often converge in the same places. And I think that we have an opportunity to be the generation that addresses both of those problems now, because the truth is they are both existential. Climate change is real. We see that by the severity of the storm events that we seem to get multiple times a season now. We can't even call them once in 100 year, once in 500 year rain events. We can't call it that anymore because we just had one. We had two this summer. We had two in 2019. We had some in 2014. I can't do much math past it, but that's not 100 years. And these have hit people who are living in persistent poverty right now even harder. The people who had basements flooded. That wasn't like storage flooded. That's living space flooded, right? And so we need to make sure that we are investing in the infrastructure to actually have that not happen. So our My Healthy Climate Plan, our My Clean Water Plan, those are two packages of proposals that are seeking to address both these problems at the same time. My Healthy Climate Plan talks about getting our state of Michigan to being carbon neutral by 2050, having state government operations be carbon neutral by 2030, by investing in solutions to make that true. The state of Michigan is part of the U.S. Climate Accords. This is a down payment on this infrastructure. Now, going a step further with water specifically, the My Clean Water Plan, $500 million investment in water infrastructure. So the mayor talked about challenges in cities across the state when it comes to do with lead pipes. We put a proposal forward to replace all the lead service lines in Michigan last year. It's not a new proposal. We're proud that we're seeing on the federal level, the bipartisan infrastructure framework has monies to replace lead service lines. We have additional water problems to that in Michigan as well, though we're working to do that. We also have PFAS contamination that's impacting cities and communities around the state of Michigan. Michigan's been a leader in the research about how to mitigate that, how to define a standard for what's dangerous. We need to continue that research and those mitigation efforts. We have an opportunity to have world-class water infrastructure in the Great Lakes state. That just makes sense to me. We have 21% of the world's fresh water. We have more inland lakes than any place in America. We should be able to manage our water, but that requires investment. And so we proposed investing in this infrastructure for more than a year. We need the Michigan legislature to meet us where we at. We need to be at the table to come here and say, let's invest these dollars in our people and in the systems that support them. So that in addition to being able to drink safe water, we have pumps that are able to sustain when it rains, and we don't have flooded freeways and flooded roadways. That's the water infrastructure that we are looking to build and invest in. And that will help us be in a position to have better quality of life because we're not worried about those things to that degree. That's what this is about. Now, I want to talk about kids in cities. I want to talk about it in two phases. And I'm going to use, selfishly, I'm going to use the lens of my own family. So I have a 2-year-old daughter, for those who don't know, my baby girl. She's born on Juneteenth, 2019. Great birthday. And in this pandemic, we've seen how critical it is to have someplace to take your kids. Right? Like everything falls apart if there's no place for kids to go. If we don't have school, if we don't have childcare, daycare, like everything falls apart. The economy just like doesn't work. But before the pandemic made that so abundantly clear to more people, we already did not have enough childcare in Michigan. We didn't have enough. There are neighborhoods in Pontiac that are not well served by a childcare center. We need to invest in that type of human infrastructure to be available to people because nothing unlocks parental productivity like a safe place to take your kids. We need to invest in this. And that is why in our state budget, again, I want to talk about, we signed it at the end of September. We invested $370 million in childcare infrastructure in Michigan, a generational investment. And what that unlocks is 3 big things. First and foremost, it makes childcare available at low or no cost to 105,000 additional households. More than 100,000 households that have a place to take their young children, an educational experience to give them, where they can have adults who are professionals, helping them to be their best self and their best early learners. That's great. But I want to talk about the professionals because the second part of this is we're trying to address the disgusting irony that the professionals who we charge with educating our youngest learners are the worst paid educators in our system. So during the pandemic, we temporarily increased pay for childcare professionals. Well, this state budget makes that increase permanent. More than $2.65 per hour, a permanent pay increase. Now, let's be honest, it does not make being a childcare professional a good paying job. It doesn't. We got work to do to get there. But again, just like I said, that affordable housing is not a $100 million problem. Like paying childcare professionals better is not a $2.65 an hour problem either. But we are taking a stand and saying that we are going to start walking that path in Michigan in a way that other states are not choosing to do that. But we think it's important. We want to invest in these professionals or invest in our kids. And the third piece, and perhaps the piece I'm most excited about, is we want to change the incentive, the mechanism that one makes it more viable for a person to have a childcare business and operate one, which in turn will encourage more people to start them. We want more people to launch childcare business. We changed the reimbursement structure between those childcare service providers and the state government, looking at the regulatory framework, which is very complicated to have a childcare business in Michigan. But again, I talk about nothing unlocking parental productivity, like a safe, affordable, reliable, convenient place to take your children. There is no business that creates more value because of the productivity that it enables. That's the best kind of business to start. It solves a community need, and it enables us to thrive and be prosperous. Everybody. It's a win-win. And the thing I'm excited about with these different kinds of incentives and hoping to encourage more people to start these businesses is what kind of entrepreneurs start childcare businesses? Women entrepreneurs start childcare businesses. From an equity perspective, this is how we diversify the talent pool of people who launch businesses. And in places like Pontiac, in communities of color, I'm gonna go on a limb and say that, you know what? Women of color start those businesses. So with this kind of new mechanism, Pontiac, it's gonna be a whole lot more Black women running certified licensed childcare businesses and solving a community problem. That is the definition of a virtuous circle that is leading to us investing in one another, investing in learning experience for our young people, investing in entrepreneurship in our communities, and creating what I talked about on the second slide, generational economic opportunity. There's no better investment that we can make. Now, going a little bit higher on the age scale, so I also have twin 8-year-olds who are third grade. Their birthday is good too, because they're born on my birthday. How about that? Okay. So in June, we signed the largest K-12 education budget in the history of the state of Michigan. The deepest investment ever in Michigan's history. I'm proud of that. That's an applause line for sure. But what's good about that is not merely the top line number, not merely just that it was the biggest pile of money ever put toward education. What's good about that is it is also the most research-driven, equity-focused education budget we've ever signed. And for those of you who've been in the game a little bit, so y'all remember in 2019, back in the mid-90s, when the state of Michigan adopted Proposal A. Remember that? We'll change the way we funded education. And remember the promise that was made in Proposal A. What was the promise? The promise was equalization. The promise was equalization. That we were going to fund wealthy districts and districts fighting poverty equally, because that was fair. Has that ever happened? This is the first state budget since Proposal A was enacted where we have achieved equalization. Now, how do we get there? How do we get there? We got there through smart prioritization at the state level. Yes, we had to decide that this was something we were going to do, that we were going to follow the research. A lot of research that came from Oakland County educators that were validating the fact that when young people are living in poverty, we need to invest more in their education, not less. Okay, so it's following that research. But also, we got there because, yes, because of the pandemic, because of the extraordinary challenges that educators have faced, we had federal resources to invest in education systems differently. We believe that this gives us the opportunity to set a new floor, a new standard for how education monies are spent in the state of Michigan. We are eager to move into that more equitable future that gives districts more flexibility to meet young people's needs, to meet families' needs. For example, if your district needs to spend more on transportation services for whatever reason, I know transportation is a challenge in Pontiac. The district serving you has the flexibility to do that with these funds. If you want to invest more in career and technical education services, this enables you to do that. If you need to invest more in students who have special or extraordinary needs, this gives you both the money and flexibility to do that. Or if you recognize that every child, or really every person, but every child certainly has experienced some form of trauma in the last year and a half. All of them. So we need somebody for our kids to talk to. This budget gives districts the flexibility to be able to actually help to give kids somebody to talk to. That's what you choose, right? So rather than having your school psychologists, whatever, who probably serve in 8 buildings, 7 buildings, maybe they can serve 3 buildings and give kids more attention. That's what this is about, closing that gap. And so we think that this is a chance to, again, lay a generational foundation for young people to be invested in and feel invested in, and to be confident in their role in our communities and in society. We're very excited about that. Very proud of it. And so the final piece is transportation and mobility services. Now, for those who don't know, this is very near and dear to my heart as a full-time bus rider before I took office. Bus, bike, everything except a car, right? In Detroit with my babies, which people think is really hilarious. But the reason I share that is because, these services, they exist for people. They need to serve people from all different walks of life. They need to be convenient, accessible, reliable, affordable. And it hasn't always been true. We have gaps in who and where our transportation systems serve. And so the state budget that we've enacted, and we're proposing to invest more, is helping to actually make public transit services more useful to people. How about that? To make it to work on everything like extend longer hours, routes that are more responsive, but also upgrading fleets. We also doing this with school districts. 27 school districts gonna get electric school buses, right? Clean up our fleet. Now, but on top of it, again, because I want to show you how this all interconnected. So to connect to what I talked about, the Michigan Reconnect program, that was our professional training, right? Professional certification. If your transportation system gets all new buses, that means you need all new skills to know how to manage them, how to service them. But again, this investment in Michigan Reconnect, departments of transportation, districts can now have a place to send their people to get trained on how to manage the fleet of the future. This is creating economic opportunity, creating jobs, creating pathways for careers to continue and to be born. We also are eager to keep Michigan at the forefront of the electrification of the mobility industry broadly. So we're investing in charging station infrastructure being available everywhere, so that at some point, all of us are going to have an electric vehicle where gas is not an option. And there are some hurdles to people being comfortable getting there. And part of it is you worry your car battery is going to die. So by investing in this infrastructure and having it placed in communities across the state of Michigan, so that anywhere you drive, you'll be able to get home, because we have places where you can charge your vehicle. And we're trying to take it a step further here in Michigan. We have some pretty innovative stuff. We're working on a 1 mile stretch of highway where your car will be able to charge wirelessly without you doing anything. It's the kind of innovation that engineers, inventors, students, scientists in the state of Michigan are capable of. We've always been capable of that. We have an autonomous vehicle corridor pilot that we're looking to run between Detroit and Ann Arbor, where you'll have dedicated highway space to autonomous vehicles, and learn just how do we even work with these autonomous vehicles. We need a place to learn that. So this is the innovation that's going to continue to drive mobility and transportation forward in the future, but also being able to support what that means practically today. I want to recognize my friend from the Community Foundation, and I was at the event where you announced the M1 mobility program that is servicing young people getting to all sorts of services, particularly extracurricular experiences. We want to support programming like that are responsive to communities' needs, that were responsive to actually hearing what people want and need to have. That's what this is about. That's what all this stuff is about. That's why I'm here to have this conversation with you. So not only can I talk about what we've done in the last couple of years, but to hear where we need to go for the next couple of years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. How do we move Michigan forward? So just a couple of specifics on Pontiac. So the school aid budget increase that I talked about means an additional $589 per student. Foundation funds, $589. Again, that's real money to be able to improve all kinds of services. Whether it's mental and emotional support services, whether it is transportation services, CTE offerings, special extraordinary needs, whatever it is. I also want to talk about, since I mentioned this in the beginning, public safety. So I'm not one of those people that believes that you have to make a choice between investing in public safety in terms of investing in community support programs and in investing in the quality of law enforcement professionals. I think that's a false choice. So we put forward a proposal that actually recognizes that, being law enforcement is a really hard job. Really hard job. And we need to support those professionals. Because it's a hard job, you need to have adequate access to training on an ongoing basis through your career. Just like teachers. So education professionals, right, have continuing education requirements, right? Got to continue education requirements. So for law enforcement professionals, we want to have continuing support services available to them. And that includes mental, emotional, behavioral support, because it's a hard job. You see stuff, right? You see stuff as law enforcement. You confront people consistently on the worst day of their week, month, or life, okay? And that impacts you. But we don't consistently do those kinds of evaluations and check-ins with law enforcement professionals after they start work, which doesn't make any sense. We're investing in infrastructure to support that. additional training. We're proposing investing in dealing with the backlog of unsolved cases, having state police support that. And that's important because, for oftentimes, if someone has, let's say, shot somebody, it's possible that person could shoot somebody else. So we have to find and actually close these cases and make sure they are adjudicated fairly and equitably. We also want to provide incentives for law enforcement to live in the community in which they serve. We believe that changes the relationship. We believe that changes the relationship between professionals and their community. We believe it changes that. And so helping to put the state on the pathway to support that in communities across Michigan is really important. And so last but not least, y'all ready for me to talk about roads now? Last but not least. Like I said, a lot of time on it. But our state budget fixes 100 bridges across Michigan. That creates 2,500 construction jobs. Right? In addition to the infrastructure investment on roads and bridges, which is important and critical, we need to do all that because our roads are dangerous. Not just that they're annoying, they're actually dangerous and expensive. We also are making generational investments in stuff near and dear to my heart, which is internet access. Every person in Michigan should have internet access, high speed, high quality internet access at their house, in their home. So we established the Michigan High Speed Internet Office earlier this summer, a month earlier in the year. I don't know what month it was. To be able to do just that, to take advantage of this moment. We have the biggest opportunity to expand access to the internet before us right now since the internet was invented. We have to step up to meet this moment. And so this office was established to help us organize that response. Okay, so that's what I wanted to present to you about the investments that we have proposed and are making to build thriving cities in Pontiac and every other city in Michigan. So my question to you is, what else do we have to do? How do we continue to move forward? What kind of choices do we need to make or changes do we need to make from a policy, program, a practice perspective to be able to enable this city to continue to thrive? So thank you so much for participating in the conversation. I look forward to hearing from you.
Portion of our conversation, we're going to open it up. Questions? Gentlemen in the back. Give me this information sent to me so that I can disperse it within my area district and around the whole city if possible. However, my question is, I've been in this business for over 40 years. I've been on CDC's, Citizen District Council, all kinds of committees. I've been on the school board. I've been everywhere. And my question now, from the 70s to now, this has not changed. The redlining, the money that's coming in. Y'all have done a great job. I give you credit for that. Y'all, this governmental body has done a great job, all the way down to the commissioners as well as state representatives. You've done a great job of getting us funding. Now, the problem being that a lot of this funding over the years and still now does not get to the people that the money's needed to get to. Y'all are dispensing a lot of money, but the guidelines are put on the people that's supposed to receive the money, the ones in need. They can't get it because they don't qualify many of the times. And we still are working with that. So bottom line is, when the money gets to the city, the ones that it gets to, the state is not asking for what the progress of the expenditure of that money has been, or how are the people faring that's supposed to get that money. So therefore, in y'all's assessment that's being sent to you, you're not getting all of the facts because the people that are poor are still coming up poor when you leave office. Why is that? If you're giving us so much money to help us get out of poverty, why do we end up still in poverty when y'all leave office year after year after year for the same thing that we stated in the very beginning? And a lot of it is due to policies that don't allow the people that really need the money to get it because it's already been expended before it gets to them.
Yes.
So yes, I have a lot of stuff that I would like to share with you. So if you get in touch with me, then I'll do it in a different body. But that
Yeah.
I felt was very needed that you understand going back to Lansing, that this money is not reaching the people that really needs it. Thank you so much.
All right. So look, I promise y'all I didn't plant that question. Look, I appreciate that, sir. And I want to, well, just to address what you said up top. I'm a believer that the people are here who are here, the people need to be here. And one of the reasons why y'all got invited is because y'all talk a lot. Okay? I know you're gonna tell somebody what we talked about. Okay, that's a good thing. Now, to your bigger question, this is something that I've heard in almost every place. This notion of like the gap between proposal and intention and execution, right? And so I think you got to address that then at both of those stages. So one, like I'm a little bit biased, but I do think that our intentions and the rigor of those intentions has been quite different than our predecessors. I do think we've been more explicit about the historical and structural challenges, be they racism, be they redlining, be they whatever you want to call it. We've been very explicit about that and have therefore tried to design policy and programmatic responses that are addressing that inequity. Again, like I mentioned, for example, the piece on generational economic opportunity and on why it was important to support the small businesses in our communities. Like that was also another way we saying, I want to support Black entrepreneurs. So I do think our intentions have been more explicit and more directed because of that. So that's one piece. But what you're talking about though is like, how do we ultimately make sure that we are achieving the outcomes that we seek? And I think that requires a better relationship with the community. It requires more transparency. It requires more accountability in both directions. It requires more consistent communication. You know, that is why it's important to me to be in communication with mayors, with commissioners about what's happening. But more importantly, even than them, is with members of the community. Everybody in here is not an elected official, right? Look, I spent 5 years of my career explicitly as a community organizer. And what I learned is that the people who are actually dealing with problems are the people who are the source of the answers. And so it's critical to us to make sure we actually have a direct line into hearing that. And I don't know if those lines have ever been established in the way that we're working to establish them. So I don't have a hard answer for you, but what I do have is a different level of commitment than I think anybody else is giving you to make sure that we understand that and that we can actually try to right that midship if it's not working. Like we still see that like basically the same people are getting awarded. You know, if you give somebody the same award to solve the same problem and it's still a problem, they're not good at addressing the problem. You know, so we want to have some accountability on that as well. So we're trying to take a different approach to that. Thank you, sir. Thanks, sir. Yes, ma'am.
As I stated before, I'm Gloria Miller, District 5 councilperson. And as I stated, I can answer part of this question about being an elected official. First of all, you got to elect people that really care about the people. It's all about who you are and distribute that money out to you. If you stay focused with your body, your resident, you're in tune with them, you know what they need. You got to elect people that cares about you. This is a servant job. You're serving other people, and that's what we come with non-servant. But my question to you is that being on the council, I noticed they allocated $30 million to the council, City of Pontiac. We got $18 million. So from what I'm hearing from some of the, well, there's some forums going around about how to spend the money, which myself, as personally, as District 5, I think we should all be one body together and try how to distribute this money. So is there like a lot of stipulations, or like, for instance, for instance, one of the things I want to use in my district, I got some people that, I got some business workers in my district that doesn't have any money, they're losing their business. Okay, I believe that's some that maybe some of the ARP money could go to. But what about a person that was brought up, it was very interesting, and which always get left out? Someone that's homeless for perhaps a shelter or some means of that. And I was also listening and saying that there's a lot of flexibility to the money. Is that true? I mean, if that's flexible, then that means you can take it anywhere you want. As a council person, would you please try to explain that to me? I appreciate it.
Yeah. So let me take the last part first, because it is a challenge. So these are monies that have come down mostly from the federal government, right? And whenever federal spending comes down, there are guidelines attached to how that money can be spent. And that's set through a federal rulemaking process. So we sort of weigh in on that. We are not the decision makers on what those parameters are. We are trying to make sure that as the state allocates dollars, that the state is giving the appropriate flexibility and decision-making discretion to the jurisdictions that we fund, the local governments, et cetera. We also are just trying to make sure that cities and counties actually get money from the state. That's a big difference between Democrats and Republicans, right? Like, we actually are trying to get revenue sharing dollars up. Every state budget we've introduced, the Republicans have cut revenue sharing from our proposals, right? So we think that's important. And those are dollars that you have complete discretion over what you need to do with, right? So when I talked about flexibility in this conversation specifically, I was talking about the flexibility that exists in the education dollars. And so that is as I described it. Now, again, we're working with the monies that we have the ability to set those rulemaking processes on to have that flexibility. Because again, we've seen in the last year and a half that the need for services is great, right? And it runs the entire spectrum of opportunities for need. And so our commitment to improving access to affordable housing, both in scale and in quality, that is intended to address our homelessness crisis, our houselessness crisis. That's intended to deal with that directly. The stuff on the My Economic Jumpstart, or My New Economy Plan, is intended to support people who work in small businesses, which is most of us, or people who have ideas for small businesses and want to see them have a chance to be successful, or want to keep their doors open. And for those who have closed them, you know, the thing about people who start businesses, everybody got an idea for another business. They all do. And so we want them to have the confidence to want to try to make that business work, even if the last one didn't work, due to whatever the circumstance was. And so we're sort of declaring that our administration, the state of Michigan, will be there to support them in doing it.
Hi, Anchor Marion. My question is, how can we implement more programs for our children to help standardize testing? A huge problem. And school districts and off-site programs that can help our children with standardized testing, because a lot of children are doing well in and programs to testing.
Yes, I would want to get you with someone who's more of a subject matter expert on education to help to address that specifically. I mean, I can't say, look, as a young person, I benefited from an extracurricular experience in helping me prepare for the ACT and SAT. Like I took a SAT prep class through DAPSEP. I took an ACT prep class through a program called Exam Experts that still exists. Okay, so like I understand the value of those kinds of experiences. They were a program provided. They were free. And so I think I see the quality or the value in doing and providing that for young people. And so as a state, we look to support programs that we believe will, lead to quality experiences like that, extracurricular experiences like that. And there's more resources available for that now than there has been in a generation due to COVID response dollars, due to the recognition that so many children have unfinished learning overall that we need to support. And so some of those dollars might be able to go to that stuff. But I think I want to have somebody follow up to you more specifically on some of the tactical things that might be possible there. Thank you.
All right, my name is Joanne Barnes. You remember me,
do.
Joanne and Joanne. We do, active community activists around the state of Michigan. But my question to you is, how are we going to address the mental health? You know, our kids from A to Z, they got low self-esteem. And I think it was due to the 60s, the 70s, the drugs thing where the parents never gave them affection. And, the grandparents grew up not knowing how to love. They don't know how to communicate. So what I want to know is, we're not going to create a place like we did Eloise. It's now the haunted house, where they threw people in there and just filled them up with a bunch of pills. They need to have, and you need to oversee how and what levels these people need in mental health.
Yeah.
My question is, what are we going to do about mental health from A to Z? Everybody needs it. Most people are going out there now with the attitude, I'm going to have death, commit suicide by police because they got mental problems. Okay, these kids, like she's saying, at the SAT test, they're not being taught at home, but they know in school that there's somebody, but maybe they don't know at home or in their communities. So we need to have better mental health and mental support for our community.
Yeah, that's a great question for us to wrap on. So as I said earlier, all of us have experienced some form of trauma. I mean, just like personally, I've never had a year where I knew 27 people who died. Okay. I know 27 people who died of COVID-19. That's not counting people in my life died of something else, right? That's traumatic. Our young people have experienced trauma that they may not be able to fully articulate, right? That's what's challenging with young people in their psychology, right? They may not have the words, and so that comes out in all kinds of ways. It comes out in closing off, it comes out in aggression, it comes out in all these different ways, right? So we need to have infrastructure to support that. That's why I mentioned the flexibility that exists in this school aid budget, for example, to help schools provide some of that infrastructure for children to talk to. But going beyond that, one of the other proposals that we have put forward for the use of American Rescue Plan dollars that were allocated to the state of Michigan back in March is a $1.4 billion investment in our public health infrastructure. And a significant component of that is our mental and behavioral support for people. All right. Now, that includes a lot of things. It includes better access to services overall. It does include the construction of a modern mental health hospital. Because that we had those, right? But they were disinvested in over the last 30 years. And to your point, it got to the point where it basically was a haunted house, right? So we've invested in, we propose investing in doing the modern version of that, but also having more community-based support. So just the week before last, I participated in an announcement with Senator Debbie Stabenow that announced the full funding now at the state level of things called community behavioral health centers. These community behavioral health centers, there are 33 of them, in the Lower Peninsula of Michigan alone. And these are community-based, federally funded, state-supported access points to mental and behavioral support services for anybody. You can come in and get the services that you need. And this is an issue of not only public health and people being able to manage their situations. This is also an issue of public safety. Because I've been the lead on our administration's work on criminal justice reform, and I led a piece on jail and pretrial incarceration reform, the jail reform part. And one of the things we heard from every law enforcement professional who testified before that task force, every county sheriff, every individual, on the street officer, is that they ain't signed up to be mental health response people. That's what they do. Respond to somebody who's having a mental health episode, who's having a substance use emergency, right? And you're signed up to, you're basically responding to them over and over and over again because, and they know that they don't have a good place to take the person. So they take them to jail, which that's not designed to actually respond to a person's needs who needs those services. The people running jail know that, right? So it's a tragedy. And so we're looking to rebuild that infrastructure. And again, if not now, when? Because as I said, everyone has experienced some form of trauma. Everybody. So while there are obviously different degrees, different ways it gets carried out, et cetera, but we all need those services available in more places and to more members of our community. So doing that equity is something that we are looking to make a down payment on as an administration. And that's something that we can start investing in again this year, right now. All right, well, thank you everybody for participating in this conversation. Certainly, this will not only help me to support the city of Pontiac, but it will help support the improvement of quality of life across the state of Michigan. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and for welcoming our Lieutenant Governor as he has served us and taken that message back to Lansing and wherever. The thing that is very important is what he says here, how these conversations continue. It's continuing because he has had good communication with the city government level. And also we continue our own internal conversations in terms of the town halls and other community engagement you have part of. So we want you to look for the advisement of that. And as you saw, they kept this audience small because of COVID, right? But anybody who wasn't here, we're still recording it for our cable channel, for our YouTube channel, as well as on our Facebook. So this will be available information to everybody else who wasn't here. Pass that information around. Thank you for all the work you do. Thank you to my staff who was here as well for continuing to work on ARP and everything else. Thank you for that. Joanne's and all. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Todd. Welcome anytime. And Lieutenant Governor, take our blessings back to the governor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We also have a quick.